Did you know that not all of Baldwin IV's enemies bore Saladin's crescent? In 1184, amid the Muslim advance in the east, the leper king had to deal with something equally dangerous, an internal rebellion at the heart of the very kingdom of Jerusalem. And the stage for this tension was the city of Nablus. This little discussed episode reveals a dark side of Crusader politics, betrayals, power plays, and disputes among Latin nobles that threatened to corrode the kingdom from within. In this video, we'll dive into the dramatic siege of Nablus, where Baldwin, already severely weakened by leprosy, faced a delicate conflict, not on the walls against the Saracens, but among the families who had sworn loyalty to the cross. Behind the gates of Nablus were not infidels, but rebellious Christians, and outside, Baldwin, surrounded by few loyal allies, had to make tough decisions to maintain unity and royal authority. The siege would last for days, but its consequences would echo for years. Stay with us until the end to discover how this internal crisis reveals the incredible resilience and tragedy of the last great Crusader king. Follow now the Siege of Nablus. In the second half of the 12th century, the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem faced pressures from all sides. From the outside, Saladin was uniting the Muslim territories of Egypt and Syria, advancing against the Crusader domains. Internally, the kingdom was weakened by disputes among barons, the clergy, and the monarchy. Baldwin, diagnosed with leprosy in his youth, became king at 13 and showed surprising political and military skill. But his condition worsened over time, forcing him to share power with regents and allies, which caused constant friction among the noble families. In this cauldron of tensions, Nablus would become a symbol of the internal crisis. In 1184, Baldwin's reign faced one of its most critical moments. The king, debilitated by leprosy and increasingly removed from direct command of the troops, saw his authority being questioned within his own kingdom. Among the main focal points of tension was the powerful Ibelline family, linked to the local nobility through marriage alliances and a long trajectory of political influence in the region. The spark of the conflict was the growing tension between Baldwin and his sister-in-law, Isabella of Jerusalem, who lived in Nablus with her husband, Baldwin of Ibelin, one of the most prominent members of the rebellious family. They were accused of openly opposing the king's decisions, especially regarding the succession to the throne and the appointment of regents. Baldwin, aware of his increasingly fragile health, was trying to organize the succession to protect the kingdom after his death. This included decisions that deeply displeased certain nobles, especially those who feared losing power with the rise of a new regent or an heir supported by the king. The city of Nablus, an important strategic and agricultural center of Samaria, then became a haven for the discontented. According to chroniclers such as William of Tyre, Baldwin initially tried to resolve the crisis through diplomatic means. However, the rebels' refusal to submit to royal authority was interpreted as an act of treason. With the support of the Patriarch of Jerusalem and some loyal barons, Baldwin then decided to organize a siege of the city. The march to Nablus was difficult. The king could barely ride a horse and was often transported in litters. Even so, he insisted on being present. His presence was not merely symbolic, it was a statement that the crown still held authority, even over the most powerful lords of the Holy Land. During the siege, the walls of Nablus held firm. The city was well supplied and had the support of the local population, who saw the Ibelines as a source of stability. The royal troops, on the other hand, were few. Many barons remained neutral, hesitant to choose between the ailing king and the local lords, who in many cases had stronger ties to their fiefs and families. Still, Baldwin's persistence was remarkable. Even with fevers and limbs covered in sores, he continued to command, giving orders, consulting with the clergy, and maintaining army discipline. The situation began to shift in the king's favor when rumors arrived that Saladin was preparing a new offensive in the north. The siege then needed a swift resolution. The rebels, facing the prospect of a Saracen intervention, decided to negotiate. Under strict conditions, they surrendered the city, and Baldwin allowed some of the insurgents to keep their titles, but under close watch. This episode marked a rare victory for Baldwin against internal enemies, but it also revealed the increasingly deep fractures within the kingdom. Peace in Nablus had been achieved, but the cost was the confirmation that Christian unity in Jerusalem was dangerously unstable. Baldwin's victory in Nablus was by no means absolute. Although the king had regained control of the city and partially humiliated the Ibelin family, the rebellion left deep scars. The clemency with which he treated the rebels, many of whom retained their positions, was seen by some as a sign of weakness, while for others it showed a desperate attempt to preserve the unity of the kingdom. Among those who benefited most from the outcome of the siege was Count Raymond III of Tripoli, one of Baldwin's main allies. With the Ibelins temporarily weakened, Raymond began to wield even more influence at court. It was in this context that the king, aware of his irreversible physical decline, made a dramatic decision. He named his nephew Baldwin V as co-king under Raymond's regency. The choice was controversial and further inflamed the backstage of power. The siege of Nablus highlighted an undeniable fact. The Latin monarchy was in administrative ruins. Baldwin, although still lucid, could no longer stand without help. His fingers were deformed, his features hidden under veils, and his joints crippled by the disease. And even so, he continued to intervene, to judge, and to wage war. The sight of such a weakened king leading the siege was not merely a symbolic gesture. It was a call for loyalty, a silent plea for the nobles to set aside their personal ambitions and look to the survival of the kingdom. But that did little good. After the siege, tensions resurfaced. The Queen Mother, Agnes of Courtenay, and her faction began to openly oppose Raymond of Tripoli. Guy of Lusignan, son-in-law of Queen Agnes and husband of Sibylla, Baldwin's sister, also began to conspire for influence, casting doubts on Raymond's legitimacy as regent. Meanwhile, Saladin, informed of the internal instability among the Crusaders, intensified his campaigns in the north. The time Baldwin had spent containing the nobles in Nablus could have been used to prepare against external threats. But the king had no choice. His resources were limited, and his kingdom was constantly on the brink of disintegration. The siege also had spiritual implications. The clergy, especially the Patriarch of Jerusalem, Heraclius, began to preach more fervently the need for penance among the nobles. According to some accounts, Heraclius saw the internal conflicts as divine punishment for pride and division among the Christians. Baldwin, deeply religious, listened to these sermons with gravity. He himself, in letters and decrees, increasingly used penitential language, evoking the image of a suffering king, almost a martyr, fighting not only against the enemies of the faith, but against the pride of his own peers. In the months following the siege, Nablus was pacified, but the rebellious nobles were never fully defeated. The city would become a center of surveillance and control, a constant reminder of the fragility of royal authority. Baldwin, in turn, was forced to anticipate decisions that should have been made only after his death. The siege of Nablus, though small compared to the great battles of the Crusades, powerfully symbolizes the drama of Baldwin's reign, a courageous and fragile monarch, fighting for a kingdom that was slowly falling apart from within. The siege of Nablus, which took place in 1184, may not figure among the great military confrontations of the Crusades, but its significance is undeniable. It clearly exposes Baldwin's burden, a leper king, forced to fight not only against Saladin, but against the ambition and selfishness of the Christian lords themselves. In the face of internal division, Baldwin proved that even condemned by an incurable disease, his authority still inspired respect. His courage in personally leading the siege amid pain and physical suffering touched the hearts of his subjects and gave new meaning to the idea of kingship. not as privilege, but as sacrifice. By pacifying Nablus, Baldwin bought time to organize the succession, to try to save the kingdom's stability, and above all, to preserve the Holy Land in the face of the growing Islamic threat. But he knew the end was near, and that the real siege was not military but spiritual and political. If you enjoyed this dive into the world of the Crusades and want to keep exploring the behind the scenes of Baldwin's story, the Leper King, like this video, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next episode.